Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone watching online today. Welcome along to EduGrowth's EdTech Showcase on navigating the future of work. I'm Sarah Lamont, the Program Manager at EduGrowth, and I'm delighted to be your host for today's program. If you are new to EduGrowth, I'll tell you a little bit about us. We are connecting Australia's education, technology and innovation industry. Through connection and collaboration, we accelerate Australia's edtech ecosystem globally. So welcome along. Before we begin with today's program, I would like to pause and acknowledge the traditional owners of Australia and recognise their continuous and unbroken connection to the land, waters and cultures across the country. I'd like to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional owners of the country I'm currently on, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who are here with us today as well. Now, EduGrowth is delighted to host today's program alongside Ascolite. For a bit of background on Ascolite, they are a connected community of professionals and academics working in fields associated with enhancing learning and teaching through the pedagogical use of technologies. And we will be joined by an Ascolite member a little further down in the program. So I'd just like to, again, thank the Ascolite team for their support. On today's program, we will also hear from Professor Martin Bean, CBE, on developing your toolkit for turbulence to keep you ahead in the developing future of work. So very excited to have Martin joining us shortly. What I would now like to do, though, first is introduce the first session for today. I would like to remind you all as well that this session is an interactive one, so please use the Q&A chat box in Slido, and we'll have a chance for some questions after this first session. So I'd like to introduce our first case study with Nicholas Jenkins, the CEO of Language Confidence, on how AI is innovating the English language learning experience of their users. So Nicholas, I'll welcome you onto stage. I'll just check there we go, got your camera on. Welcome, Nick. So I'll hand over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah, and very nice to meet you all. And as Sarah mentioned, my name is Nick, and I'm the founder and the CEO of Language Confidence. And I have a presentation. All right, so I'll just get my screen up. Okay, so as a brief background about Language Confidence, so we are an Australian headquartered AI-first education company. And everything that we do is focused on the automation of teaching and testing of specifically spoken English. And I say that with a caveat because actually we are moving into the writing space as well. And the genesis of this company and this idea does come from my time as an English teacher. So I've been in the edtech space for over a decade now. And what I wanted to do, and the reason I started this business 5 years ago, was to use technology to complement what I could do in the classroom for my students. So to put it very simply, my students were able to practice their listening and reading, spelling, grammar, etc. But they really had no way of going home and practicing spoken English. So I wanted to use technology to emulate what I could do in the classroom with, the different question types for speaking, whether it's a read aloud question or a spontaneous answer. And that's what the whole idea behind Language Confidence was, is to use technology as a complement to classroom or face-to-face teaching, but also offer it as a cost-effective alternative to face-to-face teaching. So I do think technology is still a way off replacing a really high-quality teaching experience. But obviously, there's millions or hundreds of millions of students in the world that can't access or afford, a high-quality language education. So that's the other use case, is not only use technology as a parallel to the face-to-face teaching, but also as an alternative for students that can't access it. As a business, so in terms of the agenda today, I wanted to run through a quick sort of background about our business and what we do and the different question types. I'm also happy to do a demo, Sarah. I'm not sure if we've got time, and then explain some of the different use cases that we've seen with our products. So here we have some of our customers and our partners. So we've partnered with the Australian government via Study Australia. We have also partnered with Learnosity and Oxford University Press. And we have some customers in, I believe, every segment now of the English language learning space. So every segment from primary to secondary, tertiary, test preparation, interview or job readiness preparation, and placement or testing space as well. So we really have quite a broad range of application of the products that we make.
Nick, I just wanted to quickly answer your question. We've got about sort of 10 minutes. So if you can do a demo in that time, very welcome to do so.
Okay, cool. I will try. I'll move a little bit quicker then, because I think the demo is the most valuable part.
Yeah.
So very quickly, we are partnered with Oxford. We've integrated the Oxford dictionaries into our products. We have co-branded them as well. And basically what that means is for our phonetic lexicon, for our pronunciation assessment, we do use the information that comes from the official Oxford dictionaries. Which is a very, very exciting partnership and co-branding of the products. And the products that we have are B2B APIs only. And for people that aren't maybe so technical, an API is basically a plugin. So you can plug in this functionality of our products into an existing website or mobile application, so that it really enhances the students' learning experience, so they can access automated, real-time, detailed feedback on their spoken English and soon to be writing, and receive that feedback in real time. And we have, at the moment, we have 3 products: the pronunciation, the scripted and the unscripted APIs, and the writing API, which is coming soon. So the first product, and this was our core and original product, was a pronunciation assessment. So being able to listen to a student or prompt them with a word or sentence to read aloud. Our AI listens to them and then generates feedback on where they're making an error and what the type of error is, whether it's a substitution or whether it's an omission, all the way down to a granular or a phoneme level. And we do that for both a UK and a US accent, or a bias towards an accent. And then the second product that we have is similar in nature to the pronunciation product, for the same question types. We're prompting the student with a word or a sentence, but we're able to provide feedback on reading fluency. So not just pronunciation, but rate of speech over time, any repetitions or filler words or pauses or restarts, etc. So if you're presenting a student with a leveled reader, this is an automated way of assessing their reading proficiency. And it actually opens up a range of use cases for not just English as a second language students, but also native speaking or L1 students as well. And then the third product that we had, and this is something that I wanted to build from the day that I first had the vision for this business, was the unscripted speech assessment API, where instead of prompting the student with a word or a sentence to read aloud, we prompt them with a question to answer, an image to describe, or a lecture to retell. And we're now actually building an AI tutor, which is, the end goal for our business is using the detailed technology which we've built to be able to give real-time feedback, exactly as I would give in the classroom, deliver that as an on-demand or cost-effective alternative. And the feedback that this product generates is quite a range of feedback. So first of all is relevancy, based on the relevancy of the response to the question that was given to the student. Estimated scores based on frameworks. So, and to be very clear, this is an estimation. This is in no way a representation of these frameworks, but it's an estimation. Further detailed feedback on fluency, speaking fluency, and then also feedback on grammar, complexity, mistakes, where they occur, the correction, etc. And then the same for vocabulary as well. And I have some screenshots here, but Sarah, if I've got time, I'll probably try and jump into the demo, because that's the most powerful one. But in terms of some of the case studies, is the first one which we've got here is with Study Australia. Study Australia is the marketing or the acquisition funnel. It's the first touch point for a lot of foreign students that want to study in Australia. So what we did is we worked with Study Australia to design a very simple 10-question test using our unscripted speech assessment API, but positioned not as a learning or a teaching or a testing tool, but as a marketing tool. And we found that it's a really high percentage of conversion. So it's nearly a 40% conversion to the call to action once the test is actually completed. So we found that very, very successful as an engagement and really generating high quality, really on strategy leads for Study Australia, which is a use case we did not envisage when I was building an education company. The original allotment purchase of tests, which was meant to be for a 12-month pilot, was consumed in 9 weeks. And then we've now progressed to a full commercial rollout, which is very, very exciting to see that used for the Study Australia website and with the Australian government. And a big thanks to Vic and the team there for their support. And now that we've gone to a global rollout for this product as well. And then I don't actually have a screenshot. I was looking for one this morning. So Sarah, I do very, very much apologize, but I'll talk through this. So Galaxy Education was one of our very first customers about 2 years ago. We signed a contract with them for the pronunciation API. Galaxy Education is one of the biggest education companies in Vietnam. I believe through their Hoc My business, they have 4 or 5 million students in total across all their products. And they ran a pilot, I think quite a long pilot, with our pronunciation API in their I Can Kid or I Can English platform. And basically what they wanted to test is the appetite of students and how well this would be received from teachers. So they wanted to make sure that this was seen as a teaching aid, not a threat to the teachers themselves. That has now been successful. It's continuing to grow at 20 to 30% month on month. And what they've now built is a preparation platform. So for IELTS and PTE and some of the other recognized tests, using our unscripted speech API as a product which allows students to prepare for these tests, and also incorporating teacher feedback if they want the extra. So really it's a complementary tool to these teachers preparing these students for these recognized tests. And again, this is in no way a representation of those tests themselves. And they're also soon to be a customer of our writing API. So from a teaching and learning point of view, you can see the building of trust from a teacher, but also a student point of view over the past few years, particularly the last 12 months has really accelerated as well, where students are asking for AI tools and teachers are becoming more and more accepting of these, particularly, I mean, as the accuracy of this increases. So we're, above the 85%, I believe, in terms of matching human scorers for our exact scoring metrics. So really increasing the accuracy. Now, Sarah, how much time have I got left?
Really, we should probably roll into questions now, if that suits you.
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So we do have a couple of questions. Maybe if there's a link you can share, Nick, to watch sort of a demo or the like, we can share that with people watching as well after the fact. Now we've got a couple of questions. Feel free to add your own into the chat as well, but I've got a couple that I have pre-prepared, which I might go to first. So firstly, Nick, how do you envision AI contributing to the transformation of traditional teaching methods, and what steps are being taken to gain educators' trust in adopting these technological advancements? Just noting that there are a number of educators in the room.
Yeah, look, so I grew up, both my parents are teachers. My mum's a primary school teacher. She's still teaching 41 years later, I believe. So my father was a university professor. So I got to see this firsthand growing up, that teachers are quite time poor, doing reports, doing it accurately, doing them well. So teachers, and being a teacher myself, not for a few years now, but using these AI tools to save them time and to scale up their time, face-to-face time with the students. So we've seen use cases with some of our customers in Vietnam using the unscripted API for placement tests, or in universities doing the regular semester test for English, so that there's a standardized marking across all their students. It also removes bias from marking too. AI doesn't have a bad day. It always has a good night's sleep, so it always have a fair and consistent marking across the cohort as well. So I really want to see that teachers use this as a tool for optimizing their own time.
Yeah. Another question, we've got a bit of time. What's the best one here? With the increasing integration of AI in education, what strategies do you employ to address potential biases in AI algorithms, so especially concerning diverse student populations?
Yeah, look, so we came across this directly with accents. And when we first started building, particularly the pronunciation assessment, it was more focused on an accent correction, and it would discriminate against students for having an accent. So what we did is we moved away from an accent correction or assessment and focused on pronunciation errors. And the way that we did that is with the training data of the AI. So to make this more fair and inclusive, for example, each of the accents, the UK version and the US version, has 80% native speaker data, and the other 20% is a mix. Everything from Irish, New Zealand, Singaporean, Vietnamese, Chinese, Australian, so that the AI doesn't see that a US native speaker is the absolute pinnacle of what is right in terms of spoken English, but it is exposed to a whole range of accents, which removes the bias and makes it much more fair and focuses on intelligibility rather than just an accent correction.
Yeah, it's really great. One final question. As educators may have varying levels of comfort with technology, what sort of support or training programs do you offer to empower them to effectively use AI tools?
Yeah, look, I think even seeing my mum, the progress that she's made with using technology in the classroom is pretty amazing. We don't specifically do hands-on support because we sell to platforms that then on sell to the educators.
Mm-hmm.
All we try and do is make the products as user-friendly and as easy to use as possible. So, for example, we have a Moodle integration with it's basically question type and an ease of, there's a way where we can move questions across to the new question type easily. So from our point of view, we just try and make it as easy as possible in terms of the interface for the teachers to set up the questions and then access the data once the students have actually done their homework and the assessment has been made.
Yeah. Well, look, that does bring us to time. Thank you so much for your time today. We did get the link you sent, Loom, and it's in the chat. So if anyone that is watching, we didn't get a chance to go through the demo, but that is in chat if you want to check that out later. All right, thanks so much, Nick. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, and with that, we'll roll into our next session of the program with Martin Bean, who'll be joining me on stage in just a moment. Just to introduce Martin to you. So Professor Martin Bean is a visionary leader dedicated to shaping the future of education and work. As the CEO of the Bean Centre and the co-author of Toolkit for Turbulence, which we will be hearing a little bit more about in today's session, he passionately drives partnerships with pioneering experts, cutting-edge technology companies, and executive leaders to navigate the evolving landscape of work and lifelong learning. So it's my pleasure to welcome Martin to stage. Just make sure, we've got camera on here. Welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Sarah. Hello, everybody. Can you hear me okay, Sarah?
I can hear you very well, yeah.
Good, yes, Sarah.
So we'll jump pretty much straight into your session, but just to give a little bit of context to people watching, Martin will be presenting for, I think, about 30 minutes or so, and then we'll roll into some Q&A. So again, I do encourage everyone watching to please enter questions into the chat box, and there will be a giveaway as well. So stay tuned for that. So Martin, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Sarah, and it's great to be back with all of my fellow ed tech pioneers and innovators. It's lovely to see all of you here, and I'm just delighted to be able to give you just a little taste of my recently released book, Toolkit for Turbulence, and share a few of the pieces of that book, some of the tools, some of the insights. And I've got to tell you, it was such a pleasure writing this book with my co-author, Graham Winter. He's the former 3-time chief psychologist to the Australian Olympic team. And Graham was already working with my team at RMIT University well before COVID hit, but was right there with me as almost overnight we realized we needed to come up with a very different leadership toolkit to be able to get the university through that very challenging time. And of course, now that we're moving out of the pandemic, we just have turbulence all around us. So this book is designed for leaders like you that realize the dust isn't going to settle. There is no new normal. It's going to be choppy. It's going to be chaotic. And that means we as leaders are going to have to respond to it if we're going to be able to move ourselves from adversity to advantage. So let's jump right in. And as Sarah said, feel free just to type your questions in, and then we'll get to as many as we can along the way. The first topic I wanted to share with you is what we describe in the book as the pathway of advantage leaders. And as I was mentioning before, COVID was really just an accelerant to many of the shifts and disruptions and turbulence that are going on all around us. And we list a few to the left there: inflation, hybrid working, social media storms, supply chain disruptions, talent shortages, and of course, the impact, as even Nick was talking about in teaching, of the application of generative AI that will fundamentally disrupt almost every job on the planet in one way, shape, or form. So all of this turbulence is swirling around us, and the really smart leaders are figuring out how to embrace it and move from reacting to all of that change to actually engaging with it and actually responding rather than reacting. So first up today, grab any device that you want. And what I'd like you to do is to go to menti.com and type in that code and just begin typing in some words for everybody to see about how you feel your leadership environment is right now. I did this morning with a global audience from the Chief of Staff Association, and it was fascinating to see from a global audience the way they described the environment in which they're leading in right now. So menti.com, use that code word, and let's sit back and see what's on your mind. And I'll just pause for a moment, Sarah, and make sure that you can still hear me okay. Are we doing well?
Yeah, doing well so far. Can hear and see you well.
Very good. And we're just waiting for some of those responses to come in now. And if people are, here we go. I was a bit worried, mate. So we've got fluid and chaotic. This is a tag cloud. You'll all be familiar with that as you type your words in. Chaotic is a pretty interesting word, certainly one that comes up a fair bit right now. Hyperdynamic, messy, fearful. Yeah, I'm hearing there's a lot of fear, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Nice to see some positives. We've got somebody that's finding it thrilling right now. We've got somebody finding it toxic, unfortunately. But you can start to see as that tag cloud takes shape that you are all sort of self-diagnosing the fact that we live in these unbelievably turbulent times. Again, somebody there with dictatorial, which is a bit sad to see that's the environment they're in. But as the tag cloud continues to grow, you can just start to see that we self-diagnose the fact that it's pretty turbulent out there right now. And human beings are not wired to necessarily enjoy being in this state of chaos, to pick up one of the words that are there. We're sort of pre-wired to like certainty. And when we're faced with a lot of instability, we have a tendency to go defensive. to move down rather than adaptive. So when we talk about the pathway of advantaged leaders, it really begins across 3 stages. The first is to use the disruption as a force multiplier to achieve what's impossible in stable times. And if you think about what we all lived through with the pandemic, that's exactly what happened. Things that we would have thought of even a week or 2 weeks earlier, decamping all of our school and university systems and TAFE systems and moving them onto largely a distance education footing, certainly for an extended period here in the state of Victoria, but across Australia. So that's sort of, we experienced the disruption, but the really smart leaders and teams then recalibrate their personal and team mindset to embrace new tools and adaptive capabilities. And then they take those capabilities to emerge stronger from new types of disruption. But to do that, it requires changing your own mindset, but also then rescaffolding your leadership team to be able to survive and thrive in that type of environment. So the second topic that I wanted to talk to you about today is all about calibrating your mindset. And I want to sort of talk about 2 very different types of challenges. To the left, we've got those technical challenges, and we describe them as being linear challenges. There's a practical, known solution. There's often expert knowledge that provides us with best practice. There are clear rules and boundaries. It's all about fixing the problem. And once that's done, it restores equilibrium. And more importantly, it sort of follows a predictable pathway that leads to confidence and trust. And interestingly, a lot of our governance or investors, they crave linear challenges. They want things to act and behave in linear ways. But increasingly, that's not the world you all live in or I live in. The world we live in is that we're largely confronted with non-linear or adaptive challenges where the solution is unknown and the problem is unclear, where there is no best practice, and you've really got to explore to navigate your way through. It often crosses conventional boundaries. It doesn't sit neatly inside organizations or customer segments or stakeholders. It requires new assumptions, beliefs, and habits to get your way through, and ambiguity and uncertainty is everywhere. And when ambiguity and uncertainty is everywhere, it leads to a lot of unease and resistance. So what I want you to all do for me, if you can, is think about an adaptive challenge you have today. One that in the book you know is making you squirm a little. There's no right or wrong answer. There's risk associated with any path you might go down, and you're under pressure to actually make a decision, to move with the challenge, to plot a direction. And if you can, I want you to write that down or just hold it in your mind, but just take a moment to think of an adaptive challenge that you've got right now. And if you don't have one, you are very, very lucky. So I'm sure most of you will be able to think of one. And now I want to talk to you about what happens when we're faced with these adaptive challenges. It's perfectly natural and normal that when we are confronted with uncertainty and adaptive challenges, we get driven to security thinking, which we talk about as being defensive, cautious, and fixed. And you'll see some of the descriptors there. We hold tight to control and power. We passively resist. We agree too readily, or we try to be too perfect, or we shut down and we dismiss other ideas by judging and criticizing too quickly. And all of us, when faced with turbulence or insecurity, we head there, we go defensive. And what I want to just reassure everybody about is it's perfectly natural and normal. It's sort of what we're wired to do. But really adaptive leaders recognize within themselves the symptoms of squirming. Often it can be quite physiological. Our heart rate increases. We feel anxious. We find ourselves withdrawing or moving away from the challenge. And the key is to recognize those feelings within us and build our own toolkits that we talk about in the book to actually maintain shape or an adaptive mindset. And that's all about opportunities, seeing the opportunities, responding rather than reactive. It's about being constructive, courageous, and creative. And some of the descriptors there, we go towards the challenges, we iterate and experiment, we expect mistakes and learning, we assertively speak up, we openly seek feedback and insight, and we encourage alternative views. So again, I want you just to pause for a moment and think about your adaptive challenge that I asked you to identify, and be honest with yourself and say, where are you from defensive to adaptive? If you had to rate yourself on that challenge, would you be a -5 and all the way at the bottom of security? Or would you be a +5, really running towards it and being constructive, courageous, and creative? Now, I want you to step back and think about your leadership team and ask yourself the exact same question. Are they manifesting security behaviors, or are they too in the opportunity space, constructive, courageous, and creative? And for those of you that have investors or boards or governance, it might be worthwhile just asking yourself the same question again. Are they defensive and expecting you and rewarding you to act in defensive ways? Or are they engaged and supporting you to act and behave with an adaptive mindset? And in the book, we sort of encourage you to keep this diamond sort of close at hand. So every time you feel those moments of squirm, you can sort of sit there and go, right, where am I? What have I got to do? I recognize the symptoms. I know it's perfectly natural, but my job is not to go defensive. My job is to go adaptive. So what do I need to do to hold shape and move myself and my team towards the top of the diamond? And so when you do that, we sort of think about your off game or your A game. And I want you, after this session, when Sarah sends out the presentation to you, to think a little bit about what is different in your mindset and behaviors when you are off your game and when you're playing your A game. And we all know it. We all absolutely know when we're off our game in a meeting or with a problem or a challenge versus our A game. And in the book, we help you sort of identify what takes you to your A game and what you need to do to start moving to the A game, and how to move to the A game when you're in your off game. The third topic then I want to talk about is, once you've got your own mindset in the adaptive space, you're responding rather than reacting, that's when it's time to really think about unlocking the potential in your team. And I've got to tell you, the way that you want to establish your team and set it up in 2023 is fundamentally different from 2019. Not because, as I said before, COVID changed everything, but wow, did it accelerate everything. And then, of course, the aftermath of that we've talked about. And I want to introduce a really simple but very powerful model to you that we describe as the heartbeat of team collaboration in complex, fast-moving, and changeable environments. And the model is all about aligning, collaborating, and learning as a team, and not seeing that as a static process, but seeing that as a dynamic process that you need to be spinning all the time. And align is all about commitment, shared values, vision, principles, goals, expectations, and agreements. And in the book, we talk about having a shared purpose for your team and a shared set of priorities, because most executive teams don't have one. They come together as a group of people running the enterprise, but they are disproportionately concerned with their home team. They don't take the time to think about why the executive team exists. What is the purpose of that team? Because I've got to tell you, if that team isn't doing the Horizon 2, 3, and 4 thinking, nobody else is. And it's not just large companies that do that. I was with an ed tech entrepreneur yesterday. His team is about 80 people, and they have retreated into defensive thinking. And as I chatted with this individual, it just became so clear that when that team is getting together, that leadership team, they're chewing up all of their time about reacting, and they're not stepping up to their responsibility of responding and really strategically looking ahead for the enterprise. The C stands for collaborate. It's all about the human interactions. And we largely talk about that as sharing, as the team connecting, engaging, problem solving, co-creating, coordinating, supporting each other, challenging each other in psychologically safe environments. And are they giving to each other and supporting each other as they need to do it? And the third area we look at is learning, which I've got to tell you, out of the ACL model is where most teams fall down. Learning is all about an adaptive mindset, reflecting, taking the time and committing the time as a team to reflecting, to debrief, to do formal feedback, to gather the insights wherever they happen to be, walk the imperfect information into the room, to innovate, but to also deconstruct the tempo of the team and reconstruct it in a way that works more effectively. A lot of the chief executives that I work with and their teams around Australia have completely abandoned annual budgeting cycles, for example. They've moved to quarterly cycles because with so much external change, the whole idea of being able to plan effectively for a full year just is no longer relevant. And that's an example of having the courage of deconstructing your ways of working on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis and putting it back together in a way that works better for you. So in the book, many of these tools are available on the website for you to download as well. We talk about the team canvas. And the team canvas you can see is broken into align, collaborate, and learn, but it's all about 6 building blocks that you can follow to build your team. Direction, focus, connection, synergy, awareness, and tempo. And after this webinar, what I would encourage you to do is to go through each of those blocks. So for example, in direction, to score your team out of 5, from -5 to +5, about how well you have defined a clear and meaningful team purpose. And do the same for compelling vision and narrative to capture the hearts and minds of your people. Complete that for yourself, but then maybe walk into your next team huddle and put this in front of everybody and get them to do the same and start posting people's perceptions. Once you've done that, you'll find a whole bunch of tools inside the book that will help you amplify where you're doing really well, but also help you get at some of the deficits, some of the areas that the team needs to focus on to really move into being an advantage team with an adaptive mindset. And then the final thing I wanted to talk to you a little bit about before we go to Q&A is about you and you needing to be the coach your people need. A coach unlocks the potential of the people they coach. And that's what people need from our leaders right now in uncertain and changeable times. And when I called Graham, literally as our borders were closing and we were shutting the facilities of RMIT, I asked Graham if I was leading an Australian Olympic team into a campaign, what would I have to do differently with my leadership style? And we realized that even though I had this beautifully manicured leadership playbook that I built over 30 years, everything was different now. And I was going to need to be a very different type of coach for my team than I was pre the pandemic. And one of the things, we have 15 other senior executives who have contributed to the book. And unprompted from them, when we talked about what would need to be different as you now lead into the future, what did you learn from leading through the pandemic? Unprompted, almost to a person, they talked about vulnerability and how they discovered vulnerability during COVID as we invited everybody into our homes and shared in ways that we typically didn't do. And they figured out how to build authentic and genuine connections and relationships by being vulnerable that creates a safe and supportive environment. And here you'll see that we've identified 7 signs of vulnerability out of those conversations. Admit uncertainty, open to feedback, ask for help, show emotions, share stories, admit mistakes, and take risks. And I want you to take a moment, if you will, and just ask yourself the question as you look across these 7 signs, which of them, and I won't ask you to identify publicly, but if you had to just pick 1, 2, or 3 of these that you know, if you practiced a bit more, would make you more powerful as a leader, what would those 1, 2, or 3 things? Would it be about admitting uncertainty? Say you don't know, admit to an uncertain decision. Would it be about sharing stories? Tell about your struggles, tell about your challenges. Would it be about admitting mistakes, taking responsibility, acknowledge a screw up or a stuff up and owning that and sharing? I'm sure that as you read through these, there are 1, 2, or 3 that you just know could be wonderful areas for you to practice when you get back into your role as a leader. So what I'd like you to do now for me, if you can, and again, this is anonymized, is why don't you just share with the group now which of them you think, what are the 1 to 3 signs of vulnerability that you would like to focus on to capture your superpower? And why don't you just go ahead and share that with the group right now? For me, just as you're doing it, it was all about sharing my life stories that I'll talk to you a little bit about in a moment. But why don't you just go back into Mentimeter and let's just see what the mood of EduGrowth is as it relates to this. So that's interesting. Open to feedback popped up pretty quickly. We'll have a few more crowding in now. There we go. I see admit mistakes has jumped up there as well. Yep, very good. I'm actually quite pleased to see we've only got a few responses in so far, but it's really good to see that people feel they're doing a pretty good job of sharing their emotions. That's actually great to see. A couple more coming in now. Share emotions is still interesting for this group, that taking risks is jumping up. Look at that. That I find quite interesting given the nature of this audience. And of course, I want you to reflect on the connection between taking risks and that security thinking versus the adaptive thinking. So well done, everybody. That starts to give a little bit of a picture as to what people have in their minds. The last thing I want to share with you, which has proven for myself and also for chief executives that I've worked with across Australia, is the power of sharing your personal values with your team and why they drive you to succeed. I always ask the chief execs that engage me that in the first session, I want them to walk in and share their personal values and tell the stories that surround it. And they always get a little nervous, and I always get a little nervous because we're not quite sure how the team is going to react. But I've had 100% success rate of this actually helping a team pull together and define their own North Star. You'll see to the left on this slide, when Graham challenged me to do this for myself, to share with my team, what the actual email that he sent me. So I want you to take a moment to read that email that Graham sent me and reflect for a moment on your strongest personal values that you know drives you to succeed at work, and probably for this group in life in general. And why don't you go ahead and just start sharing those with the group? So if you are under pressure to deliver at work, what 1 to 3 values would you fall back on to guide your actions? And let's just see if we can get a picture from the group as to what you believe is driving you. While we're doing that and we're waiting for them to come in, when Graham, my answer to Graham's question, after a lot of soul searching, the 3 values that I defined were courage, care, and mateship. And it wasn't so much about the words, but it was about the stories that were often from very early in my life that I brought to life for the executive team at RMIT, that ultimately sparked an incredible conversation of what was driving them, that then allowed us to be able to define our North Star to manage through the pandemic, where we needed to reduce our expense base within 12 months by up to $300 million. We may have an issue with the Menti graph there. I'll just give it a couple more seconds, see if anything comes in, but I would have expected 1 or 2 by then.
I might just butt in really
Keep
quickly.
going, and I can always step back.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, Sarah.
I did have a little bit of trouble joining on my one. That may just be me, but I'm not sure if others are experiencing the same difficulty.
Maybe. So what I'll do is I'll move through that one because it had started beforehand. So
Sure.
My apologies, folks, but at least you've done that for yourself. So just in conclusion, Sarah and Kwong, we sort of see your toolkit needs to be broken into 6 areas. And this is the way that we've structured the book. It's all about the pathway, mindset, recalibration, teaming up, coaching, and then how do you take that to scale across the enterprise? And that's sort of the way that we've scaffolded the book. So with that being said, I think I'm right on time there, Sarah. I will stop sharing and we can go to questions.
Fantastic. Yeah, it was perfect timing. Thank you so much, Martin.
You're welcome.
Was great. The Menti components it's really great for engagement. Fantastic. Yeah. Now it is time for Q&A. Before I introduce our facilitator to stage, I did just want to draw your attention to something I mentioned earlier, which is the giveaway. Now, Martin has offered 5 copies of his new book, Toolkit for Turbulence, to the first 5 people that email EduGrowth at hello@edugrowth.org. So email us and request a copy, and we'll get back to you straight away. It is only 5 copies, so email us quick. I believe that the email link will be in chat, but I'll also just put it up on screen here. So it's hello@edugrowth.org.au. And then after that, we'll once we get those 5 copies out, we will have a chance to purchase the book in case you miss out. So with that, I'd like to introduce our session facilitator to stage. Let me just get her bio up. So Kwong Nasim, so she is the Associate Director of Learning and Teaching at SISTC, after being the Learning, Teaching and Innovation Manager at the International College of Management, Sydney. So with a background in technology and its implications in tertiary education, she applies her research in her own academic leadership role as an advocate for best practice in innovative teaching and learning strategies. So with that, I'll welcome you, Kwong. Make sure we've got you there. Perfect.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Kwong. Great to join us. Now, as I mentioned, again, please use the Q&A in the chat box to ask questions, and Kwong will get to them and ask them for you on your behalf. All right.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Sarah. Hello, Martin. That's a very interesting presentation. Thank you for sharing with us all your ideas and the book. While waiting for others to come in with the questions, I have one question myself. In the book, you talk about self-care. So, what do you see as the biggest challenges the leadership teams in higher education institutions see as the biggest challenges they face in the way they work with each other?
Yeah, we thank you, Kwong, and we do in the book talk a lot about self-care, because in these turbulent environments, particularly if you're in a leadership role, either you or your team, it is going to take a personal emotional toll on you, and that's just the work pressure. It's really important that we now think about what's going on for people outside the job as well. Every interest rate increase for many of the people on your team or the broader organization could actually be causing them an unbelievable amount of stress and anxiety and hardship. Just to give one example of the turbulence that's going on around, the state of the world geopolitically will be causing many of your people distress. And so you as an individual practicing self-care, but also being the coach that your people need by dialing into their state of mind, becomes incredibly important. So taking the time sort of on a weekly basis to think about your direct reports and the people that you're responsible for, and asking yourself, where are they from an emotional perspective, from a workplace perspective, from are they as often talked about in sport, are they carrying an injury, or do they need to be hydrated, and dialing into that, not shying away from it, but opening those lines of communication up and switching people in and out so that they can take care of themselves is now more important than ever before. And in the book, we talk quite a bit about tools that you can use to recognize for yourself when you need to take better care of yourself. And it's so ironic that, but under stress, we often revert to habits that actually are the most destructive for us. We stop exercising, we start eating badly, we don't sleep well, we consume more alcohol than we know we should. We suddenly slip in to all of these habits. And so by understanding why and understanding that it's not good for you, we then talk about in the book, how do you then build some strategies to stay at your peak performance. But Kwong, one of the things I got asked the other day in another podcast was, what would I do differently from a self-care perspective if I was still running RMIT? And I've got to tell you that it would come down to, for me anyway, more mentoring. I participate with a group called Mentor List, and we have mentor groups of chief executives and CXOs across Australia. So I now can see what a difference it makes to have peers in similar roles that you can share with, you can problem solve with, you can get advice from. And it doesn't need to be formal, but it does need to exist. So if you don't have a peer group right now of people that you trust and feel safe with, that you can share and explore, innovate, and cry on each other's shoulders, I strongly recommend you go put that together, because I certainly have found that to be the best tonic for self-care, Kwong.
Great, thank you, Martin. Not sure whether you can see another question pop out on the screen. As an executive team, how do you balance the conversation across the immediate needs or priorities to looking at the future horizons?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. It all comes down to time management. It's so incredible for me that I keep working with these executive teams, and after about 4 hours, they all go, "Yeah, we're trapped in reacting. We spend all of our time just reacting and troubleshooting, and we know our real job is to be driving Horizon 2, 3, and 4 strategic thinking." And then I leave, and I come back 3 months later, and they have me in the room again, and I ask them a very simple question: how much time did you commit to come together as a group with the right information in the room to be able to do that job? And sadly, the answer is very little. And the reason is the HN factor, the human nature factor. They just revert to type. They go back to the crises. They go back to the reactive, because can be quite seductive to be in reactive space. It's clear, it's tangible, it's more linear. You know what you've got to do. But actually, folks, if you are on an executive team in your organization, that is not what you are paid to do. Because if you are not doing the adaptive thinking, then nobody else is. Because when I talk to boards or I talk to executive teams reporting to boards, and I say, what percentage of your board time is spent in responding and strategy? Typically, they say less than 15%. Often they'll say 5 to 10%. So if you're not doing it, if you're not prioritizing it, if you're not committing the time, then nobody else is. And that's a really scary future for your organization.
Cool. You spoke a bit about mindset, thinking. How about how's yours? In our recent crisis, I suppose, when the borders were closed and we all went into lockdown during global pandemic.
Yeah, no, so it was fascinating. Thank you for the question. I literally was sitting in an office of RMIT. Actually, it was a meeting room above the Oxford Scholar, the pub we own on Swanston Street. And there was about 80 to 100 of my top leaders in the room. Everybody in the room was there because we needed their input, their expertise. And Graham was with us. And Graham put that diamond up on the screen. And my head was swirling. I didn't want to be the vice chancellor to let this 130-year-old university go under. I was worried about my kids and schooling. I was watching reports of toilet paper being sold out and no meat and groceries on the shelves. I was worried about the challenge that lay ahead. And I looked at that diamond and I suddenly realized, yeah, I'm in a defensive mindset. I'm actually at the bottom of that diamond. But what my university, my team, all of these people in the room need from me right now is not a run away from this, but to run right towards it. And I remember it as if it was yesterday, Kong, sitting there having that self-talk with myself. And I literally sat up in my chair and I went, right, Martin, time to get your game face on, put all of that to the side, hold your shape, let's go. And I look back on it and I go, how lucky was I that up on the screen was the diamond that day? That was almost the slap in the face to wake me up to go, I'm the vice chancellor. If I'm not adaptive, then goodness knows who's going to be. But I want, just in the spirit of being vulnerable, when I first looked at it, wow, did I know I was heading south on that diamond, Kwong.
Yeah, no, definitely, isn't it? That self-awareness, the mindset, and everything. And someone here, in response to your second question just now, talking about the asking for how do we plan for the turbulence beyond horizon planning, and the audience they are asking for a friend.
Yeah. So the best way well, first of all, the best thing to plan for is to expect the unexpected. Walk into all of your planning with the mindset of that the dust isn't going to settle. There will be other disruptions. That'd be the first thing I'd say, because that is all about state of mind. The second thing I would say is stop trying to control the uncontrollables, right? Teams spend way too much of their time chewing up time and effort, worrying about the things that are beyond their control. Focus on the things you can control. Bring the learning into the room, the right information, the timely information, the right subject matter experts. Get to the edges of your organization. And when the shifts happen, focus on the controllable and move from that and move along that pathway. So the disruption arrives. Okay, where's the silver lining here? How can we take that disruption and do things that we weren't able to do before? Recognize the need to actually rescaffold yourself and the team and your governance to be in that mindset, and then just go for it. Don't kick back against it. Don't go defensive. Don't go into your remorseful space. As quickly as you can, acknowledge it, focus on the controllables, and get on with it, and stay in an adaptive mindset to test and learn and expect mistakes, because you don't have the time to actually get it all perfect. You're going to have to do much more agile thinking in the way that you go about it.
Cool. I hope this audience will find it very useful and insightful for their business strategy training. So, apparently, it's a time of the year to do this.
It is.
Cool. Martin, I hope you don't mind to answer one more question.
No, as much as we've got time for, Con.
Okay. So what's your perspective on the higher education sector, which has some unique challenges such as culture, hierarchy, inward focus, leaders only having work in the sector, etc. So what's your thoughts on that?
You got to love it, don't you? I just think it's fascinating, but it definitely has a different way of working and operating. And we all run into that all the time. I did another podcast recently, and they asked me to contrast what was it like to work at Microsoft versus running a university. That was quite a confronting question, but one of the things that I talked about is decision making in universities is very much consensus driven, whereas in the private sector, you have a tendency to move faster. You don't always make the best decisions, but you move faster because there's more of an economic imperative or a stock imperative to move. So I think the biggest challenges facing higher education right now in Australia, and by the way, because many of you look to sell your products and services to higher education, I do believe there is revenue in risk. So if you dial into the risks posed to higher education or tertiary education institutions, that will open minds of decision makers to new products and services. And so some of the big, I think, risks to the Australian university system right now, and I'm hoping the Accord will really address some of these, but I do think the entire business model and funding model of universities in Australia is fractured. It's just fundamentally broken in the way that it's structured. I think the operating model for a lot of universities is really under stress and strain now, because universities have to move and respond faster than they ever have before to innovate, to open up new revenue streams, to drive quality of service, to build learning and teaching that is fit for purpose and rewarding in hybrid environments, et cetera, et cetera. So the operating environment is under incredible challenge as well. But then the competitive landscape is also changing quite dramatically. The more the world moves to thinking about tertiary education being 16 to 75 rather than disproportionately 18 to 24-year-olds, the more new entrants and competitors swarm into tertiary education. And Clay Christensen, the late great Professor Clay Christensen from Harvard with disruptive innovation, one of his mantras was, the new entrant nearly always wins. And so helping universities with some of those challenges that they face, I think opens up incredible opportunities for the EduGrowth family, for the products and services that we sell and support.
Sweet, cool. Thank you, Martin. Definitely, I think Australia's situation for higher education is quite similar for New Zealand. Maybe slightly different in Asia. Just because I'm a representative for Escalite, so it's an Australasian organization. Yep. But yeah, no, I could have a whole day conversation with you, the difference between working in the higher education and in the corporate. I'm not sure I can handle the corporate yet. But yeah, no, I see what you mean. I have some experiences in that space before, and just fascinating. One more here. Having worked with executive teams across Australia now, what do you see as the biggest challenges they face in the way they work with each other? I think we kind of touch on it. Do you want to have a summary version?
Yeah, just really quickly. So if you think about that model of align, collaborate, and learn, I think probably the two that they are struggling with the most are collaborating. They're just making this assumption that because their most senior leaders walk into a room, they're naturally a team. They're not. Teams are built. Teams are nurtured. Trust, integrity, honesty, those are hard-won behaviors. They don't just happen because a group of people walk into a room. So really thinking about the collaborate in the team canvas is well worth you spending time on. And then, as I mentioned in the presentation, it is about learning. People are bringing the wrong information into the room, Kwong. They're walking in overly curated, lagging data and information that was beautifully put together a couple of years ago that is totally irrelevant for the world that we live in now. So really breaking down the tempo of the way that you come together and operate and prioritize your time, and making sure, even if it's only 80% accurate, getting the right timely information in the room from the edges of your organization, from your customers, from your stakeholders, from the community. That's where teams are really struggling the most right now. And of course, because of inflation, most leaders have never led in high inflationary times. Only old people like me have done that. And so leaders are really struggling with, in their P&L, all of the slack being taken out. Their cost base has inflated by 7 to 15% from a standing start. There is no resource to go around. So that extra pressure of not having the resources, coupled with the need to respond rather than react, those are the big challenges that are weighing on the executive teams that I work with.
Nice. Someone say they find being vulnerable, find vulnerability challenging. They naturally like this, but they find many others aren't, and they actually take advantage of that and can use it against you or use it as a way to gain power over a situation.
Yeah, I saw that question and it made me sad, but I recognize it. That's not good leadership, folks. If you are allowing in your organization, your team, your environment, people to use their level of comfort to be open and assertive or aggressive, that's not what I've been talking about. So in the book, we really talk a lot about easing your way in to vulnerability, not expecting, nor should you ask everybody on your team to immediately open up and share their values or their signs of vulnerability. It's got to start with you, and you as a leader need to own your superpower and to share. But please, please, please focus on psychological safety and building the level of trust and confidence, and let each of your members of your team open up as and when they're ready, and think about it starting in little groups of 2s or 3s before you do it in front of larger audiences.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. I think that's all. While I would like to have more conversation with you, I think that we are almost running out of time now. So thank you so much. And as a Galite representative, I would like to do a small advertisement here. So our annual conference is going to be held in Christchurch, New Zealand, in the first week of December. We still accept virtual registrations if you are interested to attend. Have a look at our website. You don't have to be a member to participate in some events or activities or some of the benefits of the organizations. And that's all from me. And thank you so much to EduGrowth for this collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwong.
Thank you so much, Kwong. Really appreciate it. And we'll get a link to the Ascolite page as well, shared soon. And so thank you so much, Kwong. Thank you so much, Martin. That was fantastic. I did just want to let everyone know, in case they missed in chat, the 5 copies are gone well and truly, but there is a link which I'll just put up here for people that want to purchase your book directly. So if you missed out on one of the 5 complimentary copies, you can scan the QR code, or I think there's a link in chat as well, and grab a copy. So thank you again, Martin, for your time. We so appreciate it. And until next time. Okay, so with that, I will move on to our final session of the program. Let me get it up in front of me. So final session, we've got about 15 minutes left. I'd like to introduce Managing Director of EduGrowth, David Linke, to give us a bit of an overview and an insight into a really exciting program via in collaboration with Western Sydney University. It's the EdTech Innovation Network program. So I'll hand over to you, David. I'll get you on screen.
Thanks very much, Sarah. And I'll add my thanks into both Martin and Kwong as well. Martin gave us a fantastic insight to what's happening in leadership, and I sort of having a few palpitations and thinking back to the pandemic, which feels like such a long time ago and such an important component. I'm just going to share my screen because I'm going to share some slides. As Sarah mentioned, EduGrowth, in partnership with Western Sydney University, is going to be launching the Higher Education Technology Innovation Network. And what I wanted to do was spend a few moments just giving you some insights and ask you if you're interested in participating, then you can express interest and we'll be in contact with you very soon. We are building a collaboration through action model. We want to get EdTech companies working together. We know that education innovation requires engaged stakeholders committed to a grand vision and the action through a scaffolded collaboration framework. We want to connect 4 key actors in the market to build EdTech innovation. We need to begin with the educators in the classroom. We need to ensure that they are part of the conversation. We want to bring EdTech companies together. We want to add in education researchers, and then we want to get innovative education providers. You've probably all seen a triple helix model of innovation where you typically see researchers, industry, and government coming together. We see that in this model, but we need to ensure that the educators in the classroom, the lecture halls, the vocational training rooms across the country, and probably into the workforce as well, to be honest, are part of that conversation. Our vision is really simple. It's an engagement framework for innovative education providers to partner with ambitious edtech entrepreneurs and world-class education researchers committed to reimagining learning in a digital age through a collective impact program. We were very lucky a few years ago to work with Global Victoria to build the EdTech Innovation Alliance, which informed this program. So through that alliance, we helped EdTech companies connect to Victorian and international education providers. And what we saw out of that was more than $10 million worth of revenue and more than $12 million worth of investment for those companies. But most importantly, what we saw was impact on the learners that these edtech companies and institutions are trying to impact. We started to measure efficacy. The EduGrowth plan is to build a network across each of the education verticals. We want to work with K-12, higher ed, vocational and workforce, and we are launching with Western Sydney University the higher education, which will include some vocational partners as well, in which we are going to work through a series of actions across a year. We are talking about something that is a known model. It builds upon the work from Digital Promise and the University Innovation Alliance out of the United States. It has a series of defined scaffolded actions so participants know where they fit within the model. It's about thought leadership, shared understanding, and co-design. And ultimately, we want to create this brand halo of innovation where Australia's components of the EdTech ecosystem come together to ensure that we're impacting learners around the world as we reimagine education in the digital age. The network will include a series of partners, a steering committee to drive it, the institutions, the researchers, the educators, and then startups, scale-ups, and established companies, depending upon where you are. This is what the framework looks like, and in a moment I'll share what that would look like across a calendar year. But we'll build a community of action. So every quarter, this group of people will come together to think about the big things that are impacting education. We'll create this environment where we can get voice of the educator into the edtech company so that as they're building out their products, they're taking into account the policy settings in the education sector at the time, and also the curriculum and pedagogical thinking that we're seeing happening in the sector at any one moment. We'll build mentor connections so that early stage edtech entrepreneurs can connect with more established and actually educators themselves to ensure that they're on the right track. We'll help companies build proof of concepts, which are going to be 8 to 12 week structured implementation to show the impact of an edtech solution in the context of a target learner. What we're hoping for there is that edtech companies start to get their product market fit better aligned to what educators are wanting in the environment. We'll then move on to the guts of the program, which is where we start doing pilot programs and start doing efficacy analysis. Consider these 3 to 6 month structured research programs with education researchers supporting to document the efficacy of EdTech products. I mentioned the Global Victoria EdTech Innovation Alliance a moment ago. In that program, some researchers, some principal investigators from Monash University and Deakin University defined a model of measuring impact and efficacy for EdTech products on a small scale. We're all probably used to efficacy analysis happening over random control trial experimentation, which typically happens over 2, 3, 4, 5 years. This model is a much a more streamlined program focused on ensuring that EdTech companies get evidence of the impact that they're doing, because we know that that builds trust. And the final component of this project will be an open symposia where we share the innovations, both successful and non-successful. There will be some that do not impact the way that we designed. And in our experience, we saw that you can get all of this happening, reasonably quickly. Across a year, this is what it's going to look like. So this is a sort of proposed calendar. This is not defined in action right now. We'll have this action group working every quarter. We'll have voice of educator a couple of times. We'll have mentoring a couple of times, and then we'll do 2 blocks of proof of concept and pilot projects, and this innovation symposium, which will come out at the back end of this project. So that introduces the framework and gives you some instruction and idea of what it's going to look like. I think you're more than welcome to ask questions in the chat and I'll answer them, but I think we now have a couple of questions. Sarah, did you want to put any of those up on the screen and I'll answer them?
Yeah, sure. So first question here, what level of engagement are you looking for from educators or edtechs to participate? And what sort of commitment do you need from educators and /edtechs?
Well, I might separate those out into the 2 components. So if you're in an edtech company, we want you to become a member of the network, participate in the action group, and then consider setting yourself up to have a pilot or a proof of concept in year 1, because what we are hoping for is to help you build your evidence record. If you're an educator, then again, the same thing. We're asking you to participate in the action group, and we're asking you to bring a pilot or a proof of concept into your institution in the first year. We envisage that this will build over time. So it's not going to be, you have to start now and do everything. You will engage as you're ready and as you develop throughout the process.
We've got another question. So a question around the level of data that partners will receive.
That's a really good question. So I might change the term partners to participants in this instance, because I think what we're talking about is edtech companies and education providers. So firstly, it's very important to note, because we're talking about edtech products being used with learners, some of that data will have to remain confidential because that's a requirement of the environment in which we're working. But what we do hope to do is to share what was the desired outcome, how did you go about deploying it, and what was the things that you learned from it and the actual outcomes that you got, because that will give us some information to be able to help understand what's going on. At every point in time, we'll ensure that any pilot project, any research project will have ethical sign-off by the principal investigator. So we'll ensure that that data is meeting all of the benchmarks we need to meet.
And we've got a final question here, which is around timing. I think you briefly spoke to it, but maybe a little more detail around the timing you're working to and about getting buy-in straight away.
Okay. So in simple terms, we are launching now. We expect to have the first action group meeting at some point in February or March 2024. Wow, the year is flying along so quickly. So early 2024, which will then define the calendar. After that, we will probably do some proof of concepts to begin with the expectation of doing some research in the back half of 2024. So we're looking for expression of interest right now. We're looking for organizations to become part of it. There'll be more details released over the next coming months. And here's a QR code. I think you can scan and submit your expression of interest to participate.
Yep, that's right.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, so if that's it from you, David, on the EIN?
That's it from me.
All right, awesome. So thank you. Oh, is there anything else you want to add, David? No, we're good. So with that, I'd like to wrap up today's program. Apologies, it might actually be one last final remark. David's giving me a signal.
I just wanted to finish off and say thank you to and acknowledge Western Sydney University and the team with Cherie Diaz and her team there in the Education Innovation Group, who have really been supportive and helping us build out this network. So it's essential that we have partners in this. We are in conversation with another half a dozen universities to join into the network. There are already a group of EdTech companies who have expressed interest in participating. So if you're a researcher or a leader within a university, please reach out and we'll get you engaged into the network.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for that, David. And again, thank you to all of our other speakers throughout today's program. So to Martin Bean, to Kwong, and to Nicholas Jenkins. It's been a fantastic program. Thanks for all your engagement today as well. What I might do is, a final prompt about the EIN. There, the EOI is open and ready to receive any of your inquiries. And we also, again, have the link to the Toolkit for Turbulence book in chat. So please have a look and grab a copy of Martin's book. Again, I'd like to thank Ascolite as well for their partnership in bringing together today's program and for their support of the ecosystem as a whole. We're looking forward to many more programs with them. And with that, have a lovely afternoon or evening wherever you're joining us from, and we'll see you at the next one. Thank you.